Imagine being completely and utterly alone. You are floating in an endless, terrifying expanse of dark, freezing water. There is no land in sight. In fact, you are so impossibly far from human civilization that the closest human beings to you are not on Earth at all. They are floating 400 kilometers straight up, inside the International Space Station. This is not a thought experiment. This is a real mathematical coordinate on our planet. It is a place so remote, so hostile, and so devoid of life that the world's most powerful space agencies looked at it and decided it was the perfect place to hide their biggest, most dangerous secrets. Welcome back to Anime at Listor. Today, we are traveling to the ultimate oceanic nowhere, a place where billion-dollar space stations go to die in a terrifying rain of fire and toxic metal. We are diving into the extreme isolation, the dark biology, and the apocalyptic future of the Spacecraft Cemetery, mathematically known as Point Nemo. To understand how isolated this place is, we must look at the geography of nothingness. Point Nemo is the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. It is located in the absolute center of the South Pacific Ocean. If you take a boat to Point Nemo, the absolute closest piece of dry land is over 2,688 kilometers away in any direction. It is a three-way tie between the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, a tiny speck called Easter Island, and a deserted atoll called Juicy Island. It takes weeks of relentless, dangerous sailing to reach it. Because of this extreme isolation, Point Nemo was not actually discovered by an explorer on a ship. It was discovered by a computer. In 1992, a Croatian-Canadian survey engineer named Hrvoje Lukatila used a geospatial computer program to calculate the exact coordinate on Earth that was furthest from any landmass. He named it Point Nemo, after the famous submarine captain from Jules Verne's novel, meaning no one in Latin. But the isolation of Point Nemo is not just geographical, it is biological. You might think this untouched ocean is a paradise for marine life. The truth is exactly the opposite. It is an aquatic desert. Point Nemo sits precisely in the center of the South Pacific Gyre. This is a massive, rotating system of ocean currents that acts like an invisible fluid wall. It traps the water inside, preventing nutrient-rich currents from the coastlines from ever entering the area. Without nutrients, there is no phytoplankton. Without phytoplankton, there is no base for the food chain. The water here is incredibly clear, but it is biologically dead. There are no massive schools of fish, no great white sharks, and no whales. Just miles and miles of empty, crushing pressure. And it is exactly this biological dead zone, combined with the extreme distance from human shipping lanes, that made Point Nemo incredibly attractive to the world's superpowers. Space exploration is a messy, dangerous business. What goes up eventually must come down. Satellites run out of fuel. Cargo ships deliver supplies to the International Space Station and then become useless orbiting trash cans. Entire space stations become outdated and unstable. If you leave these massive metal objects in orbit, they become lethal shrapnel, traveling at 28,000 kilometers per hour, threatening to destroy our entire GPS and communication networks. They must be removed. They must be crashed back into Earth. But you cannot simply drop a multi-ton titanium-reinforced satellite from space and hope it misses a city. The re-entry process is a violent, chaotic event. When a spacecraft hits the Earth's atmosphere, the friction generates temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. The spacecraft is ripped apart. Fuel tanks explode, solar panels disintegrate, and the hull melts. However, massive pieces of dense metal, like rocket engines, titanium spheres, and heavy gyroscopes, survive the inferno. They streak across the sky like apocalyptic meteors, carrying highly toxic rocket fuels like hydrazine. When these flaming toxic fragments hit the Earth, they do not land in a neat little pile. The debris footprint of a crashing spacecraft is an oval-shaped destruction zone that can stretch for 3,000 kilometers long and 100 kilometers wide. NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Russian Space Agency Roscosmos needed a target area large enough to absorb a 3,000-kilometer trail of flaming shrapnel, with a 0% chance of hitting a human being, a commercial ship, or a sensitive ecosystem. Point Nemo was the only logical answer. It became the official classified spacecraft cemetery. Since 1971, over 263 spacecraft have been intentionally crashed into the dark waters of Point Nemo. The ocean floor here is littered with the twisted, scorched remains of billion-dollar engineering marvels. There are hundreds of Russian Progress cargo ships, Japanese HTV supply craft, and European automated transfer vehicles. They are sleeping in the pitch-black abyss, 2.5 miles below the surface, slowly being consumed by the crushing pressure and the salt. But the most legendary, terrifying crash in the history of Point Nemo occurred on March 23, 2001. It was the death of a Titan, the Russian space station MIR. MIR was a staggering engineering achievement. It was a 142-ton modular space station that had orbited the Earth for 15 years, but it was dying. Its systems were failing, and it was becoming a massive, uncontrollable hazard in the sky. Roscosmos had to bring it down. The operation required flawless mathematical precision. Firing its remaining thrusters, engineers in Moscow forced the massive station to slow down and dive into the atmosphere. The sky over the South Pacific ignited. Witnesses on a tiny island near Fiji saw a terrifying spectacle. The sky was filled with a massive golden-white fireball, breaking apart into dozens of flaming meteors, leaving thick trails of smoke. Sonic booms echoed across the empty ocean. Within minutes, over 20 tons of surviving metal, including the massive docking ports and heavy machinery, slammed into the water at catastrophic speeds, sending plumes of water hundreds of feet into the air. The Titan was dead, resting forever at the bottom of Point Nemo. However, the abyss is rarely silent. In 1997, oceanographers listening to underwater microphones, originally designed by the military to track Soviet submarines, detected something that shook the scientific world. Coming from the general direction of Point Nemo, the sensors recorded an ultra-low frequency, incredibly powerful underwater sound. It was so loud it was picked up by sensors over 3,000 miles apart. They called it the bloop. For years, conspiracy theorists and even some scientists speculated the impossible. The sound profile matched that of a living biological creature, but the math was terrifying. For a creature to make a sound that loud, it would have to be several times larger than a blue whale, the largest animal to ever exist. Did a prehistoric leviathan live in the Spacecraft Cemetery? The truth, discovered years later, was slightly less cinematic but equally awe-inspiring. The bloop was not a monster. It was the sound of a massive mega iceberg violently cracking and breaking away from the Antarctic ice shelf, creating a seismic acoustic wave that traveled across the empty ocean. Today, the waters of Point Nemo remain quiet, but the agencies are preparing for the ultimate apocalyptic event. The countdown has already begun for the largest, most expensive man-made object ever built to meet its fiery end. The International Space Station, a 400-ton, $150 billion floating laboratory, is scheduled to be decommissioned. It is too old and its structure is fatigued. Sometime in the winter of 2031, NASA will execute the final deorbit command. A specially designed space tug will attach to the ISS and forcefully push it out of orbit. The resulting re-entry will be the most violent man-made atmospheric event in history. A 400-ton city of metal will hit the atmosphere, turning the sky over the South Pacific into a blinding inferno. Thousands of pieces of flaming titanium will rain down on Point Nemo in a destructive footprint, stretching for thousands of miles. It will be the grand finale of the Spacecraft Cemetery, the burial of the ultimate Titan in the darkest, emptiest grave on Earth. Point Nemo is a monument to human ambition and our need to control the uncontrollable. We look to the stars with wonder, but we bury our failures and our finished tools in the dark, silent depths of our own world. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. As our orbit becomes more and more crowded with commercial satellites and private space stations, will the ocean be large enough to hold all our falling stars? Subscribe to Anime Atlas Tour, hit the like button and share this documentary to expose the hidden realities of our planet. Tell us in the comments below. If you had the chance to take a boat to Point Nemo to witness the crash of the International Space Station, would you risk the journey, or is it too dangerous? The countdown to 2031 has begun, and the abyss is waiting.